Well, hello everybody. Welcome back. Thank you so much for joining me. Like I've said in previous videos, we're focusing on worship, and we might be doing this a little differently than how you might be used to it. You might think about music and the time that we have corporately together as we sing and praise, and that is one awesome part of worship. But I've been trying to break down maybe what it looks like more on a daily rhythm and a daily cadence, and just really what it looks like in our life on a regular basis of how we can give honor and praise to God and true reverence to Him through our lives with everything that we do and everything that we are. So last week we kicked it off and we started at looking at silence and solitude. The week before that I just kind of gave you guys a rundown of what we're going to be looking at through the next few weeks and through these videos. So feel free to go back and look at those if you want to catch up. But today we are going to be focusing on what I said is called affirmations. Now affirmations really stem from us trying to control our mind and renew our mind, and that's what God tells us to do in His Word, is to transform our mind and renew our mind. And so affirmations is a big part of my daily rhythm because I need to be reminded constantly of who God is, who God says I am, and that helps, I think, set me up for a way better worshipful day when I understand the relationship between God and myself. And so I wanted to just encourage you a little bit through the Word today, and just different ways that I do that and I go about doing that. So hopefully this helps. So first off, I'd like to say that I know the world has a very has a version of this that they like to use. They would call it like self-confidence, or they use the word affirmations as well, where they're trying to speak positive things into their life. You know, you can do it, you can be great, you can succeed, and that's not what I'm talking about here. I think that people that both start to believe those things and speak to those things into their minds can achieve some great things. But for me, that's very self-driven, the self-confidence in what I can do as a human. And that's not what we're looking at here. What we're looking at is we want to put our confidence in God. Really, we're dying to ourselves more and looking up at Christ and saying, wow, look what you can do. And on top of that, look who you say I am in relationship with you. And so that is the connection that I am trying to bring out here when I speak about affirmations. And really, again, this comes to our minds and how we control our minds and how we think and the proper ways of thinking. And so I wanted to hop into the Word and just highlight a couple verses for you guys to help encourage you in that way of using these affirmations, using the Word to help encourage you and ultimately help you worship God in a more biblical way, I'd say. So the first one I want to look at is Romans chapter 8. And if you got a Bible, feel free to join me, but I'm going to be reading verses 5 through 8 on chapter 8. He says, "For those who live according to the flesh set their minds on things of the flesh. But those who live according to the Spirit set their minds on the things of the Spirit. For to set the mind on the flesh is death, but to set the mind on the Spirit is peace and life. For the mind that is set on the flesh is hostile to God, for it does not submit to the law. Indeed, it cannot. Those who are in the flesh, cannot please God." So we see right out of the get-go here in chapter 8, verse 5, he says, "For those who live according to the flesh set their minds on things of the flesh." Now, I struggle with this a lot, to be honest, just constantly allowing my spirit or my flesh to speak for who I am and saying, oh, you can't do that, you're not good enough, or you're comparing yourself to so-and-so and trying to do it that way, and just never measuring up to what I think is good or what I think is acceptable to God or for anything else I do in life. And so it's something that I've honestly really struggled with. So for me to read this is very difficult, because it says, well, we want to be those that live according to the Spirit and setting our minds on the things of the Spirit in the second half of verse 5 there. And so what is that? And there was a question I kept asking him, like, how do I set my mind on the things of the Spirit? What are those, God? Am I thinking about heaven? Am I thinking about angels? Like, what does that look like? And so the revelation for me really was thinking about these affirmations and thinking about the things that God says, the truths of God, and what those are, and then in relation to me, what those look like between me and God. And so I started looking through the promises of God. And so that's how I think about this portion a lot in the morning when I get up and I get moving. I speak these promises into my life. I speak the promises of God, the truths of God, and I like to do that out loud. I think there's a power in speaking something, and for me, I'm very verbal, so I like to hear things and I retain them better. So I like to speak them out loud when I given the opportunity. So I originally would go through the Word, and as I was reading, I would find promises, I'd find truths, and I would highlight them. I'd pull them out, or I'd journal them, put them down in a little notebook. But man, with the internet, we have such a great resource and such a great tool. And so I actually went in and I found a website that has a promise for every day of the year. And so I encourage you guys to go online and check that out. It's called 365promises.com, and that's 365promises.com. And they just have a little printout you can print out, and it shows a promise for every day. And so for me, on my daily rhythm and my way of giving worship to God, the first part of my day, worship and honor to Him, I just go through and I read these, and usually read just the one for the day, and that's what I like to think and meditate on. That's what I like to process and just kind of allow to sink in, and I try to go back to it a few times during the day. But if you can, write them down if you want to, print them off, but have them with you, put them on your phone. Actually, that's how I usually access it most of the time during the day, is on my phone. I have a little printout on there, and so I can go through and read through them. And for me, that is all about renewing my mind, transforming my mind, allowing God to put the truth into my mind where I have constant flesh and constant lies and the things that are not true about myself, one, or just about humanity and about the world and about what's going on. And so allowing God to wash my mind with the Word and the promises of God, the truths of God, has been instrumental in doing this. Just want to read a couple more verses to encourage you, though, and just to continue in that light. So the next one is in Philippians verse 4. And as we turn there, it says, "Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I say rejoice." So that's a mindset. That's a thing I want to remember, right? That's a default I'd love to have in me. And then he says, "Let your reasonableness be known to everyone. The Lord is at hand. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your mind in Christ Jesus." So this is a very transformative piece for just reaffirming how God wants us to think and helping us transform our minds and renew our minds. He says to do not be anxious about anything. So that just highlights my flesh, because when I get anxious, when I get fearful, when I get worried, I can know that, hey, that's my flesh rearing up. That is not a mind of Christ. That is not the mind of God. That is not the truth or any of the promises of God. But he says, in everything, in prayer and supplication, give thanks and let your requests be known to God. And then the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds. So our minds need guarded, our hearts need guarded. And the way to guard them is to be doing that with thanksgiving, and to do that with rejoicing, is to be doing that with speaking these promises of God into our life and into our beings. And so this is such I think a reverent way to stop and worship God, is to be reading these promises, reading these truths, and allowing them to sink into our lives so we can start to renew our minds and begin to live out these truths. And so in that sense, we are speaking positively into our life because we're speaking the truth of God into it. And so I just want to encourage you guys with that. I hope that that's just a little nugget, again, to continue to help you on your daily rhythm and walk with Christ as you worship Him, as you show reverence towards Him, as you give honor and praise to Him throughout your day. Take these affirmations, take this idea of transforming your mind and apply it into your week. I would love to hear how you guys are doing this. How'd you do with silence and solitude last week? How are you going to do with this, throwing the promises of God into your life, the affirmations, and allowing God to transform your mind? I would love to hear that. So God bless you guys. Man, there's more verses out there if you want to check them out. I'll just speak it real quick. There's Colossians 3, 1 and 2. There's 1 Peter, starting at verse 13 in chapter 1. Read through those things. Find those truths, find those nuggets, go online, find the promises. There's lots of resources to get those promises and begin to digest them, begin to speak them, begin to take them in and allow God to transform your mind. Love you guys. God bless you, and we'll talk to you soon.